The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Hey, welcome back to another Mission Minded. He is Michael Coleman, the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. A good friend of mine. I've known Michael for a long period of time. We started a show called Mission Minded, several years ago, and it was first about non-for-profits, and of course you're with the Jimmy Hale Mission. You have given, I love the way you sign your emails in his service. And you've been doing that your entire life, and I love that about you. But we, obviously we've got to have a show that's going to grow legs. We have to talk more business stuff. And so we've really kind of grown into all kinds of really interesting conversations about the business place. And you've got a very interesting thing you want to get into. First of all, how are you? Everything good?
Doing great. As you can see, I'm in my Hawaiian shirt
There you go.
today. Feeling incredibly festive and free. It's really I describe it as a fat man's best friend. A big open Hawaiian shirt. You can just kind of let it all go. You can wiggle where you need to wiggle. And
there you go. Now, you are no Don Ho, but you did have, you had jury duty today. I hope you don't mind me saying that, but were you wearing that to jury duty?
I did not. Actually, my jury duty ended yesterday, but
Okay.
But I want to tell you though, and I don't. It was one of the rural counties, and I went in, and I had khakis and sure I've been in court before, and especially with judges who were like, "Hey, don't come up in my courtroom with untucked shirts and any kind of thing like that." So I thought, well, I'm gonna go in. I mean, I'm not overly dressed. I'm not gonna wear a coat and tie, but I want to look presentable. We had people come in there with just white t-shirt, grungy white t-shirts on, looked like they just rolled out of bed. The judge was very nice. It was really interesting because we got to sit there and he would come up and he would explain the whole process. And it was almost like teaching a class. He's like, while we're waiting, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in the other courtroom. Let me tell you why.
That's cool.
Let me tell you our process. So we were kept very informed. We understood what was going on, but he took the time to do that and helped us understand, the difference between a grand jury, which is what we were not. We were actually there for a criminal prosecution, and just walked us through some of the behind the scenes things that have to go on, and it was really interesting. He didn't say anything about the way people were dressed, but I'm telling you, people were there in shorts and T-shirts, had that,
there's a certain respect there. I mean, and I don't know how old these people were. It's funny. I just got an email from Father Kelly, from our priest from Our Lady of the Valley, which is one of the largest Catholic churches in the metropolitan area. And he just sent an email out saying that we should be wearing our Sunday best. He's like, short dresses off the shoulders. He's like, no. He's like, and I thought he was actually reaching out to Eucharistic ministers and lectors. I'm a lector at our church, and I don't think he was talking about us, but I think he was just talking in general. Wear nice clothes. Be nice. So I'm asking for 1 hour out of 168 hours out of the week. You can look nice for an hour. I don't care what time it is. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. Let me ask you this. So I've never, knock on wood, I have never had jury duty. Is this the first time you've had jury duty?
It's the second time. I had federal grand jury when I was in El Paso, Texas, but again was not selected. But I had to report, and so went a little bit further. I was picked. They broke us up into two different panels, and they said there was only two criminal cases to try. So our particular case, before, they said, okay, we have you. There was 30 people. They were then we were going to go into another courtroom, and then the attorneys were going to go through and get their 12 with one alternate out of our group. So, I mean, it's a better than 50-50 chance that I wouldn't have been selected anyway. But they came back and said, and the judge told us, hey, this is going on right now. When the jury starts to get picked, then people sometimes have a change of mind and say, no, I don't want to go through with it. This is the best deal I can get. I'm going to go ahead and plead. And he came back in and said, your guy just pled out, so you're dismissed.
That's great. Is that the I hope I'm not asking getting too personal, but there's a reason
Yeah.
why I'm asking. Is that the first time you've been before a judge?
No, it is not. But
We were talking because I went through, I had been in court once or twice before for like a DUI when I was like in 1990.
yeah,
And that was the only time I'd ever been in a courtroom before.
yeah,
And it scares the hell out of you because I mean, your Perry Mason comes out in you. And then of course, my last time I was in there was for a divorce that should have not have been a dirty divorce because we spent half our lives together and it just keep. But yeah, that is
I contested a ticket one time that went nowhere fast.
yeah.
Um, but I actually had spent a decent amount of time in court because when I was running Hope Inspired Ministries, we would have a lot of our students that had legal issues,
Mhm.
and they were going in front of judges, and they had nobody there. So these were not issues necessarily that required an attorney. They just had to report back to court, and they'd be in front of the judge. It may be a parole violation or something like that. You know, and like I said, not necessarily have a court-appointed attorney with them. And I went oftentimes just as an advocate for them
I got you.
and just to stand beside them and for whatever value that brought. And what was really thing that I've learned was in Montgomery in the county courthouse, you know, you have district judges, you have circuit court judges, all different levels. The vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of them would look to me to say, almost as if to say, give me any way that I can, like, I don't want to send this kid to jail. I don't
Yeah.
want to send him to prison
Mhm.
or to jail, county jail. But I can't ignore what they've done. So, and I even had one judge kind of articulate this, that, but if you're saying he's in your program, then that would give the judge an out, like, okay, I'm gonna not release him to your
Sure.
supervision, but he's at least got something positive going on in his life.
Yeah.
But if somebody goes and stands before him and there's nobody willing to come stand beside him, there was nobody advocating for him, he had nothing going for him. Lots of times they're like, well, I just can't look the other way while you have this offense. You're gonna have to spend some time in the jail.
Yeah, my biggest thing in the judge in our particular case, there were 9 court cases before ours, so there were 10, and there was a couple divorces, and there was a couple of child alimony ones, and I forget what the other ones were. And he basically said, "Listen," he said, "I'm just telling you right now, there's a good chance that neither side's going to like the way I judge here.
Yeah.
So if you can figure a way out and get your lawyers and talk right now, and figure this out before, you know, we have to go to you know, figure
Yeah.
things." And this was like the third or fourth time that we had been before this judge, um, because someone in the proceedings just wouldn't let it go. And to the point where he's like, "Yeah, I don't ever want to see you in here again." And I was like, it's not me. I'm not the one wanting to come back in here, you know?
Right.
But someone had grandiose ideas of how things were supposed to go down in the state of Alabama, and it doesn't. If you want to fight for it, you go for it when it comes to your kids, and so it worked out well. But yeah, it was for me. I always thought, you know, we talked about earlier in the show. I guess it was last week or the week before, about loving your job, about enjoying your job. And at least in the situation I was in, it didn't appear the judge that I was with really enjoyed being there. You could tell that he kept looking at his watch. He looked like he probably just wanted to go play golf somewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe he had already put in his 30 or 40 years of service and was
Yeah.
like, you know, but yeah. So,
Well, I've had, there was one judge here many years ago, and I was very discouraged because I was advocating for this kid, and he took me into a side room with the kid, um, and I said, Your Honor, I'm here saying this 21-year-old's in my program, and you know I'm optimistic, as I always am, that you know that hopefully with the right encouragement and the right support that he can make something out of his life. But I'm committed to that. I don't, you never can tell what'll happen in the future. And he looked at me with the deepest of pessimism and said, he's just playing you, right? Talking
Wow.
about the guy. And I said, well, Your Honor, that's possible. I get that's possible. That's the game I'm in, because everybody tells you, no, I'm in this, and there's no way to know who's telling you the truth and who's not until you live it out. But I would live out those situations already understanding in advance that some were going to take advantage of me. The alternative, though, is to not help anybody because, hey, they're all out to get me, or they're all going to just use me. I'm not going to be a doormat for anybody. And so you just shut the whole process and you can't help anybody that way. So I told the judge, I said, look, you're right. You're right, Your Honor. He might be, or he might not be successful in the program, but nevertheless, I'm standing here with him asking you to be merciful and release him to my program and at least give him an opportunity.
And did he?
He did. And if I were honest, I would say it played out very much just like he said.
Yeah, there you
go. But that did not discourage me. I've been talking to people about this. It is very, I always wished, when I said our program was successful, we had so many great stories of people whose lives have changed. But when you look at it in totality, you see way more people weren't transformed than were transformed. And I see people saying, oh, we have like a 90, dealing with people who are from extreme poverty, generational poverty and crime and all that. And they're like, oh yeah, we're 96% successful transformation. I know it's all a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Because I know, if you can get 2 out of 10 people to leave the culture and a lifestyle and become successful, it's so much energy just to have to go into very few. But it is so much like the old starfish story with the man and the kid walking down the beach. There's all these starfish, and he starts getting them, throwing them in. He goes, what possibility could you make? What difference could it possibly make? And he says, well, the kid says, well, it made a difference to that one, the one he just threw back into the water. That was really, I looked at it as I'm not solving this problem. I'm simply here rescuing those, or attempting to rescue those who want to be rescued.
This is really interesting. Where do you find, and I know you're a Christian, I know you're a man of God, I know you read the Bible. Where do you find your personal and spiritual optimism from when it comes, because you for people that don't know, you're dealing right now with people that obviously are hurting for hunger. And we even had a show about, people who scam the system with stamps and this, that, and the other. And
yeah,
that's something like, and you mentioned the fact that you brought this up several times where the couple that pulls up in the Cadillac and you're like, what the hell? How's a Cadillac? And you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't know if they bought that car before they just lost their jobs. You don't know, but you have to give them the benefit of the doubt, or because if you question everyone, you're not going to get it done. But certainly working at Jimmy Hill Mission, you dealt with individuals. You just admitted you had a kid who, I'm assuming it was probably the third or fourth time that was before that judge, and he's like, he's playing you.
Oh yeah.
But you don't know when it's going to take. And
that's right.
You can't give up on that. What is there a monitor in your system or in your moralistic?
I will tell you, I really think, and I've thought a lot about this. It really all starts with genuinely understanding myself is when I look at how fickle I can be and how many chances I need in my life and how broken, just returning back, kind of like scripture says, a dog returns to its vomit kind of thing. And I know this is not a religious based show, but just when I look at the story, the gospel is called the good news, and sometimes we get in the way of the good news. The purest good news is we are broken, God is holy, but God looks at us as his creation and says, I want a relationship with you. I love you in spite of you. And so does all this necessary to even to the point of becoming flesh and suffering and doing all the things that Christ did. And what scripture tells me is God entered into this relationship with me as his child, not because I bring one darn thing to the table, but because it's all 100% his story about how his love for me. And so in First John, it says, it talks about loving others, and it says, and you know how to love because you've first been loved. And so when you've been loved like that, like completely undeserving, this is not a 50-50, this is not a 99-1% relationship. I stand before God so deserving of judgment, not worthy of what he's offering. And it's this free gift of love. And so to me, what he says is, Michael, here's what I want for you is I want you to be a conduit of the love that you've received. So how then can I turn around and I'm not saying don't use judgment and don't use, insight and wisdom, but how do you turn to somebody who's oftentimes come up with the greatest of childhood traumas, the greatest of difficulties, the lack of resources, and say, all right, I'm gonna give you one chance. And if you mess this up, and I'm sitting here going, I'm still going back to God.
Yep.
And I have way more resources and way more understanding and way more opportunities, and I still screw it up on a regular basis. So it was that go search for, and again, I'm not shoving Jesus down their throats. I'm trying to love them in a way they've never been loved before, authentically loved. And in hopes of that, of course, I want them to understand what authentic love is, and then it starts first and foremost with our God in heaven.
And that's where I call my Lord and Savior out sometimes, because if I'm willing to stick my neck out like you were for this kid, and I'm trying to do the right thing, then you say, Lord, please get in his heart. Pray. You pray for him, but I'm praying for the Lord too. That the Lord prays for me. I'm going to pray for him, but I pray that you get in his heart, and then you see that I'm a different individual. Sure. And don't do this for me. I'm not here, in this courtroom to because it's the right thing to do. I'm doing it because you love him, and he's a product of your service. And yeah, so I mean, I just think it's really interesting. I could see, like doctors or people that continually have to see death or see horrible things happen, or police officers. I mean, I can only imagine what it's like for a police officer. I don't want to be a police officer. I mean, it's just, I mean,
there's a great Bible story too about, one of the prophets, his wife is unfaithful to him. And God says, no, you go remarry, you go take her back. Mm-hmm. And, and then they have the 3 children, and the names are not flattering names that are very descriptive of the pain and stuff he's been through. And of course, through that, what he was trying to illustrate is that, the bride was the nation of Israel. And it symbolized how they were so unfaithful. They would chase other gods. They would do other things. And he was trying to communicate in a way that mankind could understand how painful it is. So here's me, keeps battling the same thing, keeps coming back. And he's like, but I continue to receive you back. How can you then turn to somebody and stand in judgment and go, nope, your chances are up?
Yeah.
It's really inconsistent with the faith that we profess. And look, I fall short even in that, because I find myself sometimes just throwing my hands up saying, I'm just done. It's frustrating. But anyway, that's the genesis of it right there.
There you go. You want to talk about opening up communication today. And it's really interesting because that is one word that many men will continue to hear. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, you will hear the word communication until you die, because it's always the number one good thing and bad thing in a lot of relationships, whether it's with your boss or with your wife or with your husband or whatever. If you don't communicate, you can't do well. And some people, just because you're moving your mouth doesn't mean you're a good communicator. Talk about what you exactly mean when you talk about opening up communication with, in this particular case, your boss.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like you said, it could be a family situation. It could be, with your children, it could be with your spouse, it could be with your boss, it could be with somebody who works for you, your employee. But it could be with your peers, it could be just everything hinges on communication. And lots of times we're faced with situations, and I'll take it back. I think I was telling you earlier, right now we had an employee who was called in and was not open to correction. And so, but the supervisor really wasn't prepared for the pushback. What the supervisor wanted to say was, hey, this is what you did. This is not correct. This needs to be changed. But that whole process was interrupted by somebody who was not receiving that correction. And so then you had a clash, and then the voices started to raise. And then, okay, where do we go from here? And really that's what happens is in, you kind of retreat temporarily to let tempers calm down. But you see that all the time with, again, spouses, friends, people that you love, your children, all that, where you get this impasse. And so what ends up happening is we can stand in our conviction that, wait a minute, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong. I'm going to tell you what you need to do, or I'm your authority, you're going to listen to me. So just reading through some of these things about, really the goal should be about alignment. How can we get aligned where there's free flowing communication respectfully in both ways? And one of the things I kind of coach my directors here at the food bank and other places that I've been is, it's very important that you to treat employees with value, which means you have to take the time to listen. You may already have it all figured out in your head, what they did wrong, why they did it. It's getting time to fire them. I just want to document it. I just want to do all this without sitting down and making them feel heard. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about some feel-good exercise, but so I was just reading this article, it's just talking about it. And one of the things that you can do is always elicit more information. So using that example between the director and their employee, when the employee started pushing back, maybe that was a time for then the director to adjust and say, instead of saying, I told you to do this, you did this, and just kind of, and put them instantly on the defensive. One of the things I encouraged her to do is to say, okay, this is what, from my perspective, this is what I thought was supposed to happen. Did you understand it that way? And if you didn't, help me understand what you're seeing. And then they say, no, it did. It was supposed to happen like that. And then I'm like, but when you look at what actually happened, something different happened. And so what I'm trying to do is account for the difference. What were the triggers? Not the who. I'm not trying to find the person to blame. I'm not interested in blaming. What I'm trying to do is figure out, what was it, a process? I mean, or was it human error? If it's human error, okay, fine. We will deal with that. But is it a process broke? In other words, here was the picture of what was supposed to happen, but here's what happened. There was a difference. How do we account for the difference? And how do we work to make sure that the difference doesn't happen again the next time we do this? That's much less, you were at fault, you did this, and where you're going to get this. But you have to go into it with, how do I elicit more conversation? And so when an employee begins to tell you something, questions such as, well, tell me more, or what, that's interesting what you're saying. Maybe I haven't really looked at it enough from that perspective. Would you share with me this? Or, ask a pointed question. And even though in our minds we're like, we just want to fix it, we just want to be done with it, we just want to move on. I think I also shared with you before we started, to take this to a personal level. And believe me, these lessons that I've learned it's all from doing it wrong first, and then sometimes doing it wrong again. But I remember one time my wife and I were laying in bed. My daughter was in college at the time at Auburn, and my apologies to great Alabama fans. My daughter was in college at Auburn, and she had gone on a church retreat, had kind of talked to some people. I knew some things were going on in her life, and so she just came in one night. It was late. I was half asleep, and she just began to talk with me about it. And she mentioned that she had been doing some drinking and had tried marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I knew that my wife, that spun her right through the roof. I mean, I knew she didn't say anything. She was right beside me, but I knew that she was listening, and I knew that she was and she was just waiting for me to crawl her case. And instead, well, I could have done that, but she already knew that what my view was of her doing those things. I didn't have to tell her. She already knew. So I just simply asked her, well, what'd you think? What was the reaction to it? What'd you feel about it? And she said, well, I recognize it's not healthy for me to drink. And the one time I smoked the marijuana, it made me a little nauseous. But I didn't ask her, are you going to commit to me never to do it again? I resisted the urge to correct her. Again, not that correction, when you have, especially the smaller the child, the more direct you have to be. But she was in college and she's an adult where I'm trying to transition and facilitate communication, because when she is struggling with something, I want her to come back and talk to me. Now, that does not mean that I could not express my own view. And that's sometimes where we go with this. We want to facilitate communication so bad that we lose sight of ourselves and the role that we play as parents. So we want to be their friend, and we're scared of alienating that relationship. Like if I ever say I disapprove, or if I ever say, I don't think that's a good idea, or I'm not in favor of that. But there's always ways to do it without poking somebody firmly in the chest to say, well, again, going back, whether it's an employee, whether it's a family member. And just the last thing I'll touch on is really interesting is sometimes when I've had these generalities. Kids are great at doing it. Spouses sometimes are where you use absolutes. You always do this. This place is the worst. Just whatever it is. Or they say things like, an employee might say, I'm not getting supported. And so what I found also helpful is if you can sit down and in a calm way, not respond with energy because you're being criticized as a leader, your organization is being criticized. What does support, help me understand what support looks like to you. And guess what? They may bring up some valid points of things that you can learn on, but sometimes they make these grandiose statements and you say, well, give me an example. If you say this place is chaotic, can you give me an example? And they may give you an example or two. And you're like, you're right. That was a chaotic event, but to describe the entire organization as chaotic. Mm-hmm. So you give them a perspective, but the bottom line is all of that is a part of aligning yourself together where you're talking about the same thing. You have people who are different in their perspectives and their views, but you're bringing it all together. And all of that is necessary to have peace in the home, to have a good relationship with your spouse, with your children, your coworkers, your supervisor. The last thing in the world you want to be is, I told you to do this, do it. And all I need you to do is hear and respond to what I tell you to do. We really need to be spending the time aligning it. And a lot of that is hold in your thoughts and facilitate and learn from who you're communicating with.
Michael is the CEO of Heart of Alabama Food Bank down there in beautiful Montgomery. And of course, they do Mission Minded every single week. Great stuff, my friend. Coming up next, bone. I always say bone by bone. Why do I always say bone by bone? I say bite by bite. It's I'm always thinking about
bones. bites and there's bones and there's
One way or another, we're going to get some bites and bones up here next, right here on Tony Curry Radio. Thank you, my friend.
All right, enjoyed it.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.